it is time for another Shakespeare monologue. I'm going to have a look at Phoebe from As You Like It, her monologue that starts with "Think not I love him, though I ask for him." I believe it's on either NIDA or VCA audition monologues this year, so if you are doing those auditions, I hope this video helps you out a little bit. But if you're doing it for anything else, this will hopefully be helpful as well. Phoebe is not too tricky. I'm going to jump into what she's talking about, so I'm going to break down the meanings, although it's fairly self-explanatory, only a couple of things that you might get mixed up about, but there are some challenges in this monologue as well, but very achievable if you're not really used to Shakespeare. So, oh, and I forgot to add, at the end I'm going to read through the whole thing as well, so if you just want to get a sense of how it all flows together, I will pop that at the end. It's not a performance, just a reading, but it should help you out if you're looking for a full look at the monologue in full. So starting with, let's just get a little bit of context. So Phoebe has just seen Rosalind dressed as a boy and has like completely fallen head over heels instantly, which is something that happened in Shakespeare's day. Not just in Shakespeare's plays, but in that time they kind of thought that love at first sight was how everything worked, and it was God-given and blah, 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 blah. So it's not unusual, the fact that she's kind of gone, oh, I love this boy, all of a sudden. And so she starts talking about him, and she's talking to Silvius, who loves her. So one thing that you need to know about Phoebe is she's not super bright. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but she thinks she is. She thinks she is all that. She is an interesting character in that way, because I think Rosalind gets that sense that there is a little bit of arrogance in her, and she kind of is like, you know, this girl needs to be taken down a notch. She is not as great as she thinks she is. So I've seen contemporary performances of that where Phoebe is in quite like revealing clothes and she's sort of chewing gum and all that kind of thing. She's definitely not one of Shakespeare's intelligent, warm, earnest leading ladies that there are many of. She's just more of the comic relief that I think of monologue, like movies where you see like the hot chick, like in Mean Girls, for example. She's kind of like, is it Karen? No, she's like the Lacey Shaver, the one that is like, start trying to make fetch happen. Gretchen, she's like Gretchen. She's like that. She's kind of like, just thinks she's really, really smart and great, and is a little bit disturbed about the fact that nobody seems to be recognizing her for how amazing that she actually is, except for Silvius, who is actually not that great. So Silvius is in love with her, but she does not give two hoots about him. So she's talking to him, and I think that's really interesting to play with. So we'll talk about some of those choices as we go along, but do think about where you're talking to. So where is Silvius? As per usual, if you're filming, if you're taping, think about your eye line, because you don't want to be too much in profile for a tape. If it's in person, it can be much more kind of broad, because it works better that way for Shakespeare. So you're talking to Silvius. You don't really care about Silvius very much, but you do kind of want to play it cool. The whole thing with this monologue is that she's trying to be a little bit chill about it. Like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about it, but it doesn't mean anything. It's really interesting to play with our kind of stereotypes of modern day. You certainly don't need to make this very Shakespeare-y. You can certainly play on those kind of Valley Girl, Mean Girl stereotypes that we have, or also another option that you can look at is the kind of country girl vibe of just being like, yeah, I don't know, right? Like, well, in Australian that'd be like real ochre, we call it, but wherever you're from, it could be whatever your kind of version of a redneck or a chav or whatever. Like, it's like she's just a bit of a bogan, we call it in Australian. So you can use a kind of a country accent or a rough accent. She should not be refined, is what I'm saying. So she starts with, think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy, and he talks well. So already we've got a sense of, she's like, oh, well, it's not even a thing. But what happens throughout this whole monologue, so she's just said, he's just a peevish boy, like he's just an annoying kid, because Rosalind does actually look kind of like a very young kid, so she's being like, well, I'm too old for him anyway, whatever. Then she immediately kind of contradicts herself. there are a couple of ways that you can play this throughout. Let's do a couple more examples, and I'll talk a bit more about how you can play it, because you're always going to have to weigh up her kind of like changing her mind throughout this whole thing. Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. So she's like, well, he's just annoying, but actually he talks really well. What care I for words? Oh, sorry, I missed that. But I don't care about words, she's saying. Yet words are actually quite useful, aren't they? Like if you win over the people that are listening and you enjoy it, like that's kind of great, right? That's kind of what's going on in her head. So and not even in her head, out loud. So she's thinking aloud. You want to play with all of these things as she starts to think through them. I personally think, because she's not super bright, she's kind of saying one thing and then going, well, actually, and she's kind of going, oh, well, I suppose it is kind of reasonable. I mean, he does talk pretty well. You can play on her thinking about these things. You can play on it reflecting. You could play it that she's actually talking to the audience. That's very common as well in Shakespeare. She could be like, well, actually, words please, blah, blah, blah. But it could also, she could be quite confused about it, or she could be trying to be really casual about it and she's covering things up. So there's lots of different ways to tackle it. You will need to get some variety though, because she kind of gets in this pattern the whole way through. So you might go, okay, this time I'm going to be confused. This time I'm going to be, being chill about it. This time I'm going to be convincing. So using some actioning, for example, can be really helpful for variety. So I don't care about words, but what care I for words? Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. Now, next thought. It is a pretty youth. Like, it was pretty hot, actually. That's basically what she's saying. Not very pretty, like, not that hot, all right? But sure, he's proud. Like, he was very, and yeah, Rosalind's kind of a bit rude to her and stuff. Like, he's pretty proud, being like, it's sort of a bad thing she's talking about there. So it's like, well, he was a bit up himself. And then she says, and yet his pride becomes him. So she's like, well, he's a bit up himself, but actually, it kind of looks good on him, I guess. That kind of worked for him. So all the way through, she's sort of a little bit torn. How do I feel about this guy? Am I supposed to be playing it cool? Actually, it was really kind of hot. This is what's going on for her. Like, just ping, 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 ping. So she thinks fast. You can't embed lots of pauses in this. Don't be like, oh, but yet this. It's not, it's not Hamlet, nor was meant to be, as Prufrock would say. It's just a dumb girl. And no judgment on her, because she's so funny. She's so funny, but she's not smart. So don't overplay this. Don't overthink it. Next one. And yet his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man. Like when he gets a bit older, actually, he'll be pretty great. Next thought. And notice that her next thought, the best thing in him, this is her next thought, it comes in the middle of the line. So she's just, if that happens in Shakespeare, if something comes in the middle of the line, it means like they're just straight onto the next thought. Don't put lots of pauses in him. Sorry, I'm reading at the same time. The best thing in him is his complexion, and faster than his tongue did make offense, his eye did heal it up. So basically what that means is like his complexion, I mean, they're talking literally about like, he has really good skin, but kind of, it's sort of just, we don't really talk about, we're unlikely to say about someone, oh, they had really good skin, but they do actually in Shakespeare kind of be like, they had lovely fair skin and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, slightly racist embedded in there, but we just take it as she's talking about him being good looking. And what she's saying in that, and faster than his tongue did make offense. So because he was kind of rude to her, his eye did heal it up, and his eye being like another thing that's just attractive. It's not like it's like this. She's just talking about actually is the best thing about him was actually his beautiful face, and even when he was being really offensive, it kind of made me feel okay because he was so pretty. Pretty much is what's going on there. So I'm just smiling because she's funny. Next thought. He's not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. So again, she's just assuming that he's pretty young because obviously Rosalind is dressed up as a boy, which is gonna look very soft in the face and, you know, clearly not have a beard or whatever. So she's just referring to like, you know, when he's older. So he's not that tall, but you know, since he's pretty young, he's actually tall. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. Again, in our day and age, we don't really talk about people's legs that much. Maybe, I mean, personally for me, Henry Cavill, his leg, his legs. I'm sorry, I'm just giggling to myself here. But we don't really refer to it in this day and age, talking about people's legs. But what is she talking about? His body, like, it's like, well, he's not, like, his leg was but so, his leg is but so. And yet, 'tis well. So again, all this stuff, she's like, well, it's not that hard. And yet, I mean, it was pretty good. Oh, she just makes me laugh. Sorry, I need to calm down, Sarah. And the next bit, this interestingly here, even though it's sort of still in the same rhythm where she's like, and then this, and then this, the language that she goes into next is a lot more kind of romantic. So personally for me, I would sort of play on the language a bit more, that she's enjoying like painting the picture. She says, there was a pretty redness in his lip, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. I think she's getting a little bit carried away with herself. I personally think this is very much to herself, because she's just kind of convinced herself, not to Sylvia's, not to the audience, she's kind of just convinced herself about like, well, actually, he was pretty hot. If I do say it's, you know, if I say it out loud, actually, now I think about it, he's pretty hot. And now she starts to talk about like his perfect coloring and all these things. And she's having a moment of like, well, actually, he was amazing. And it's pretty, you know, making her a little bit hot under the collar and a little bit breathless. So do play on that, because this is kind of the high point of the monologue. Actually, she's been building up all the way to this, and suddenly it gets to like, so just to explain what she's saying, the pretty redness in his lip, basically just his coloring that she's talking about in his lip. And anytime that I think people talk about in lips in Shakespeare, it's getting pretty hot, right? Like you know, that's what they're gonna be like, oh, lips are for kissing, and kissing leads to blah, and all these things like that. So she's starting to get a little bit, a little riper and more lusty red. And notice again, the language is very lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. So she's just saying like his lips were just like that little bit redder than his nice pink cheeks. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. So just like it was just perfect difference between the two like red lips and his sort of pink cheek damask on being like the kind of like porcelain complexion that he has, which all of these things we don't really get excited about them these days, but back then she's like, whoa, his red lips and dooby. So that kind of, and then there ends the reverie, because she sort of realizes, oh, you're still here, Sylvius. And she says, there be some women, Sylvius, had they marked him in parcels as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not. So she's just, again, like trying to be real chill about it. So just to break down what it means in case you're not clear. So some women, had they marked him in parcels as I did, means marked him always means like marked means looked at. And she's just kind of saying like, if there would be women in the world, Sylvius, that if you were just looking at like the different parts of him and talking about the different parts of him, would just totally fall in love with him. But like I just don't really feel one way or the other about him. I love him not, hate him not, that's what sorry. And then again, she sort of contradicts herself again, which I think can be a really funny moment, where she says, and yet I have more cause to hate him than to love him, for what did he to do to chide at me? So she's like, well, actually, now that I say that I don't really care about him, actually it kind of makes sense that I would not like him, because he was totally having a go at me that whole time. And like, for what? Nothing, because I'm so clever and hot, right? So you can play that moment of like, and yet, that's at the end of the line. It's actually really fine to take, most of the time, take a breath at the end of a line, as long as it's not really disturbing the flow. In this one, it's not disturbing the flow. So if you wanted to play and really make it a moment, because the audience by now, or your auditioners or whatever, have got the sense like this woman does not know what she's thinking. She thinks one thing, she says another, she has got verbal incontinence. So she's like, what, blah, 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 blah. We've covered that, let's move on. He said mine eyes were black and my hair black, and now I am remembered, scorned at me. So basically that whole thing about hair black and blah, 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 it doesn't actually matter what she looks like. It's not saying that you have to have black hair to do this role. That's them calling her unattractive. That's what they used to say, like if you had black eyes or like black hair, it was unattractive. So yes, again, it was racist. So, but what you need to take from that is that don't take it as like black is ugly, because obviously that's not what's going on here. Actually, what's going on is he's saying you're gross. Hopefully you're comfortable enough with that, but it's hard looking at those kinds of things. But he said mine eyes were black and my hair black, and now I am remembered, scorned at me, was like basically again like was having a complete go at me. I marvel why I answered not again. Like, why didn't I didn't even have a comeback. Why did I not like say something in response and defend myself? And then she says, but that's all one, admittance is no quittance. So admittance is no, that's her like little sort of, just a little saying kind of thing. That's all ones means, like, it's all good, you know, just because I didn't say it then doesn't mean that I can't say it now. And that's when she has this brilliant idea. I'll write to him a very taunting letter, and thou shalt bear it. Wilt thou, Sylvius? And bear it means like take it to him. So I would completely play up this moment of she knows that Sylvius likes her, does not care that she's been totally rambling about this hot guy and just ignoring the poor Sylvius is probably sitting there going, oh, thanks a lot. Like, what do I, chop litter? And now she's like, I'm gonna write to him this letter that tells him everything I think about him, and you will take it to him. Will you, you know, and really play on that, like, Sylvius, you know, like getting what she wants. There's so much fun to be had with this monologue. If you are auditioning for a drama school, or for, if you're auditioning for drama school and you know that comedy is your strength, this is a great pick. If you are auditioning for a comic play, again, this can really showcase what you bring to the role and your sense of comic timing. As always with Shakespeare, just don't put too many pauses in. If you find your own bits of business and stuff, try and embed them while you're saying the lines rather than like in big pauses in between things, because it's really meant to flow. So, and with that in mind, let's read through the whole thing, and then we can finish. So hopefully this will give you a sense of the flow. I think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy, yet he talks well. What care I for words? Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. It is a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man. The best thing in him is his complexion, and faster than his tongue did make offence, his eye did heal it up. He's not very tall. Yet for his years he's tall. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. There was a pretty redness in his lip, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. There be some women, Sylvius, had they marked him in parcels as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not. And yet, I have more cause to hate him than to love him, for what had he to do to chide at me? He said mine eyes were black and my hair black, and now I am remembered, scorned at me. I marvel why I answered not again. But that's all one. Admittance is no quittance. I'll write to him a very taunting letter, and thou shalt bear it. Wilt thou, Sylvius? So that's my, semi-performed read version. Now, there's so much to work on in there. That's absolutely, that's my kind of basic non-performed version, by the way. So there's so much more to be done with that. There's a lot more you can do in terms of making sure there's flow and highs and lows and that kind of thing. But I hope that gives you a sense of how it might all kind of come together in some way. Some moments of comedy. There are lots of things that I kind of skimmed over that I would definitely dig more into, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the full thing. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if it is helpful or not helpful, because I'm just trying this as a new thing. So, and I've just been talking to the wrong side of the phone, forgot that my viewfinder was this on side. So let me know if there are any other monologues that you'd like me to look at. I'm going to try and break down as many as I can in the lead up to the many drama school auditions around the world that are happening in the coming months. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.